Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes, but to start, while everyone's getting settled in and logged in, we're going to watch a short video talking about Verizon Skill Forward. Verizon is the sponsor of today's webinar.
Latasha. I'm trying to move forward in having a great coaching business while also working healthcare. I'm just on a new adventure. All of the education that I needed was right there. These courses that I'm taking are giving me tangible steps to be able to show up as my best as a coach and be able to have a profitable business. I thoroughly enjoyed the courses offered at Verizon Skill Forward. I took the business lean startup and acting on the job. Those were some of the best interactive courses that helped me to get out of a place of being stagnant. As I received coaching, I feel like that experience gave me the capability to be a better listener, to be more engaged. Also, Verizon Skill Forward has offered me a community. For Verizon Skill Forward, I was at a place of depression, confusion, wanting to move forward, feeling stuck, everything in my life just falling apart while still trying to find a little smidget of hope to move forward with my dream, to move forward with this calling that just won't leave me alone. I gained confidence, I gained vision, I gained skills to help me cope with difficult situations. I gained some new coaching practices. I feel ready, I feel capable, I can make progress day by day, week by week, step by step. That renews my hope. People need to know about the program because people are stressed, people need release, people need education, people need fellowship, people need vision, people need to be able to see a way out of this situation, people need positive ways to spend their time, and Verizon Skill Forward has been all of those things for me. It's just endless information, endless community, people who truly care about you and your success. Everyone needs to know about Verizon Skill Forward.
Hello and welcome to Somatic Tools for Crisis Response. My name is Carrie Ann Gwynn. We are thrilled that you're here. I am the Verizon Skill Forward Project Coordinator for Alliance for Hope International, and I had the amazing privilege of working with Latasha. I also have the distinct privilege of working closely with the domesticshelters.org team, including Ashley Rumschlag, the National Director of domesticshelters.org, Hannah Craig, the Director of Content, and Rachel Myers, the Senior Digital Services Specialist. These are the brilliant minds and compassionate hearts behind Hope Chat. So, starting in September 2026, which is only a couple months away, the Alliance will be onboarding organizations with customized versions of Hope Chat. Hope Chat, in case you don't know, is a trauma-informed AI-powered support tool designed specifically for survivors of domestic violence. It's available 24/7. It provides a safe, anonymous space for people to ask questions, to learn about abuse, to explore safety options, and connect with local resources, all at their own pace. Hope Chat is not a replacement for advocates or hotlines, but instead it bridges the gap for people who may not yet be ready to speak with a person, and it's creating a pathway to support and the services that they need. If you're interested in learning more about how your organization could benefit from integrating Hope Chat into your support services, you can watch the replay of our info session on domesticshelters.org. This webinar is made possible by our partnership with Verizon through the Verizon Skill Forward program. In case you haven't heard, Skill Forward is an upskilling initiative that's designed to equip you and your community with the professional skills needed to remain relevant in the ever-changing job market. Skill Forward offers over 400 individual courses and over 100 professional certificate programs that are completely for free in topics like AI, Excel, coding, graphic design, nutrition, and so much more. And additionally, we got to craft this program in the way that makes sense for our audience, which is largely survivors and advocates. So we offer supplemental resources like free one-on-one coaching, monthly raffles. In the chat, you'll find a link to create your Skill Forward account. This link can also be shared with your contact list, but please note that this program is coming to a close at the end of 2026. So if you have been on the fence, it is time to get off the fence and get started. If you're interested in promoting this program within your community, please reach out to me. My email is skillforward@allianceforhope.com. We have marketing materials, email copy, flyers, all of that we can send your way so that you can start providing this awesome program to your clients and community. As you may know, Alliance for Hope International operates 6 programs, all designed to support survivors and end domestic violence, including the Family Justice Center Alliance, the Training Institute on Strangulation Prevention, Camp Hope America, domesticshelters.org, the Voices Survivor Advocacy Network, and the Justice Project. And we cannot add any more programs because 6 is a lot and I'm stumbling through them. We encourage you to visit allianceforhope.org to learn more about all that we have to offer. Here is a look at our amazing, talented, and dedicated professionals that make the Alliance for Hope work possible. We do have some great upcoming events, including our 26th annual International Family Justice Center Conference. You will not want to miss this, as well as our hidden homicides training. And this webinar is hosted by domesticshelters.org as part of our ongoing free webinar series. You can check out the watch webinar section of our website to view all of our past webinars. And then a few reminders. We do have live closed captions available throughout this presentation. All you need to do is click show captions to engage this feature. And then please be reminded that all attendees are in listen only mode. If you have questions, please utilize the Q&A box. We're going to do our best to save time for Q&A at the end of the webinar, but just in the event that we don't have time to answer questions live, we will be sending out responses with the webinar resources. So we love having questions come in. The chat can be utilized to introduce yourself and connect with other attendees. We love seeing you engage with the webinar content. This would also be a really great time to silence notifications on your phone and devices, close as many tabs as possible, and do whatever you need to do to be fully present. As usual, within 1 week, we will provide a certificate of attendance, a transcript of the entire presentation, a recording, and any other relevant resources. So a couple months ago, we sent out an email with a survey that nearly 500 of you completed. We are incredibly grateful. We wanted to know about your specific challenges working with survivors when it comes to trauma and nervous system regulation. Like we talked about in the description, this is something that impacts survivors in court settings, legal settings, all kinds of moments when dysregulation is so present and clouds judgment and impacts memory. So this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and I could not be more grateful to have Iona Singleton as our guest presenter today. So Iona is a psychologist. She's also a somatic practitioner and an educator specializing in trauma, crisis response, and nervous system healing. She is well versed in trauma in high pressure and trauma exposed environments. And some of her work includes frontline experience at organizations like On Point NYC, which is one of New York City's leading harm reduction centers, where she has supported individuals experiencing trauma, homelessness, substance abuse, grief, and crisis. And the most amazing part is that somehow she has held on to hope and joy along the way. Iona is currently completing her doctorate in counseling psychology and existential psychotherapy at the New School of Psychotherapy and Counseling. Iona, thank you so much for being with us today. We are really excited to learn from you.
Thank you, Carrie-Ann. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to just begin by sharing my screen. Let me know if you can see this okay. How is that?
Good. Perfect. Thank you, Iona. We're excited.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for taking the time to join. I want to acknowledge that many of you spend your days working with people on some of the hardest days of their lives. And it's really extraordinary work. It's also incredibly demanding. So we're focusing today on somatic tools for crisis response. And I hope you'll allow some of this to be for you as well. We'll explore what's happening in the body during a crisis, why people respond in different ways, and what we can offer in those first few moments. My hope is that you leave today with a deeper understanding and maybe some practical tools that you can take away. I also want to acknowledge that some of you here might have a lived experience of trauma. So throughout this presentation, everything that I offer is an invitation. Okay, so who's in the room? Just as Carrie-Anne shared, before we dive in, I want to share that nearly 500 of you completed this survey before today's webinar. So thank you so much for that. So we have a room of advocates, case managers, shelter staff, hotline workers, people supporting survivors through court proceedings, people sitting in intake, people answering phones at 2 o'clock in the morning. So 59% of you told us that you work with people in crisis every day, which means that regulation isn't simply something we offer to the people we serve. It's something that we have to understand in ourselves too. So we'll also be integrating that in today's presentation. So what did you ask for? So here's what you told us that you needed: helping someone who's frozen or shut down, avoiding burnout, responding to anger, setting boundaries, recovering after hard calls or crises, staying calm under pressure. And there was one response that came up quite often in different words, but it was sometimes I felt unsure of what to do. I just didn't know how to respond. So firstly, I want to begin by normalizing that response. And I'm curious if whether at the end of this presentation, when someone walks you through your door in crisis tomorrow, maybe instead of thinking, what should I do? How should I react? What should I say? You might also begin wondering, what might this person's nervous system need right now? Okay, so what do we actually mean by crisis? We often use the word crisis to describe an event. That might be a domestic violence incident, a sexual assault, a suicide attempt, a bereavement, a natural disaster. But a crisis isn't just the event, it's also what happens in the body when perceived threat outpaces our mind's capacity to process it. So the moment that felt safety collapses faster than our thinking can catch up. So often therapy works down, it opens things up, it deepens, it goes through inquiry. Crisis response also works up. It contains, it stabilizes, and it resources. So why would we start with the body? There are also crisis interventions that focus on thoughts, and they are so needed as well. But if I invite you to think for a moment about a time, maybe when you were suddenly frightened, you felt a response in your body. What happened? Most people find it harder to think and harder to find words in those moments. So during a crisis, our capacity narrows. We notice that language narrows first, working memory decreases, our executive functioning reduces, and underneath all of it, survival physiology takes over and it dominates. So the body is often available before cognition is. So we don't ignore the thoughts, the emotions, the feelings. We begin with the physiology because physiology is what's online in that moment. So we talked a bit about why we might begin with the body. But let's spend a little time understanding what is actually happening in the body during a crisis. So here's a playful framing of polyvagal theory. So if we're thinking of the nervous system as having 3 gears, if you think of a car, you don't drive in one gear for the whole journey. You shift depending on the road, depending on the demands that the road is asking you to meet. The nervous system does that same thing. So the first gear is safe and social. That might look like connection, curiosity, calm. This is what we call the ventral vagal. So in this room, it might look like someone who can make eye contact, they can ask a question, they're engaging, they're online. The second gear is mobilize. This is our fight or flight, that fast and loud. So that's our sympathetic nervous system. It might look like pacing. It might look like someone that is talking very quickly, a raised voice, or hypervigilant, someone whose eyes are constantly scanning the room. Maybe they're checking the door. So the body has decided something needs to happen right now, and it's already readying itself for action. The third gear is shutdown. So freeze, numb, disappear. So this is dorsal vagal. So this might look like someone who has gone quiet, who won't meet your eyes, who maybe they respond with one word or maybe not at all. Maybe their shoulders are hunched, they're staring at the floor, they're almost vacant, they're hard to access. So these are adaptive survival responses. The nervous system moves between them constantly. And it's not always a choice. It's what our bodies naturally respond to. So the body is just doing exactly what it was evolved to do. So using whatever gear is giving it the best chance of getting through that moment. So this can be useful when we're engaging with someone in crisis response. Once you recognize which gear someone is in, you can decide how you might want to interact with them. So looking a little bit here at window of tolerance, you might have heard about this. Another way of thinking about it is our capacity. So our window of tolerance, it's the range where our nervous system has enough capacity to think clearly, to make decisions, to connect with others, and to respond rather than simply reacting. So when we move outside of our window of tolerance, we might see panic, anxiety, hypervigilance, or we might see numbness, shutdown, or dissociation. So again, both of these, they're adaptive survival responses. So recognizing when someone is in their window of tolerance, when connection is available, and when they're outside their window of tolerance. So as responders, our goal isn't just to calm someone down, it's to gently help their nervous system find a little bit more capacity, to help them return enough to regulation so that their cortex has time to come back online. We don't widen someone's window by just simply pushing them beyond it. We widen it by repeatedly helping the nervous system return to safety. So we don't just push someone to the edges. We return again and again to safety. So in those moments, we might begin to become curious. We might be thinking, can this person connect with me? Can they answer? Are they making eye contact? Are they tracking my voice? What state are they in? Are they in that hyper arousal state or hypo arousal? Or are they somewhere in between? Which channel is open? Their eyes, their voice, their hands, or their feet? And we'll be discussing this in more detail later. So what's the smallest thing in that moment that might help? It's not the biggest intervention. What's the smallest thing? So here looking at an incomplete response and what can help. So we'll talk about what is happening in the body during shock trauma. So when a threat overwhelms fight or flight, the nervous system defaults to freeze. But freeze isn't the absence of response, it's the response that got interrupted mid-sequence. So the defensive action can move through these stages, maybe mobilize, act, discharge, recover. So mobilize, that's the surge, that's the adrenaline, the muscles priming, the body readying itself to fight or flee. Act is that energy that's actually being used. So that's the running, the fighting, the pushing away, the protecting. The discharge is what comes after the danger has passed. So that might mean shaking, trembling, crying, taking a deep breath, or finally landing. So that's the nervous system releasing the activation that built up. And recover is the settle that follows. So we're coming back into something closer to safe and social. So a lot of what you might see in crisis response is a body that hasn't completed their response. That might look like someone with the inability to act. So they might have experienced being held down, someone who couldn't leave, someone who had nowhere to run. So the mobilization happened in their body. The body readied itself, but it wasn't able to complete the action. So the discharge never got to happen. So that undischarged energy, that can remain in the body. So the body remains braced for a threat that has now already passed. So you might have noticed asking someone for a story too soon, how that can accidentally increase arousal. So you might be asking someone to narrate an experience their body is still physiologically experiencing. So during crisis, survival takes priority. Only once safety returns does the nervous system begin processing what has actually happened. So that's why someone can seem fine in the moment and then become overwhelmed hours or days later. It's also why you, as the responder, might feel the impact of a hard call after your shift ends, maybe not during it. I notice that a lot in my work in therapy, that it's only at the end of the day that I really feel the impact of what has happened. So how might we help the body finish the cycle that it never got to complete? We need small, safe ways to let the nervous system discover that it isn't still bracing. So that might look like orienting. We're going to move through these in more detail later. So orienting to the space, recognizing that the threat has passed, becoming aware of our new environment. We might need to move. We might need to release some of that energy that has been locked in the body. We might come back to the breath. That might mean slowing the breath, or maybe speeding the breath up. And we're going to go through this in more detail. So this is a really important slide that we don't have enough time to go into a lot of detail today, but most people will arrive with a history. So across a large CDC survey in 2020, 64% of adults report at least one adverse childhood experience. So here we're getting into CPTSD, complex PTSD. 17% report 4 or more of these adverse childhood experiences. People with 4 or more adverse childhood experiences show roughly 12 times the rate of health risk behaviors and are 87% more likely to have experienced other types of trauma too. So what this means in practice is that the person in front of you, like many of us, is often not encountering this dysregulation for the first time, that it's coming onto a nervous system that maybe is already in a dysregulated state. So here we have neuroception. So before conscious thought, our nervous system is constantly scanning our environment for threats or danger. So that's part of what we call neuroception. So you've probably experienced this yourself. Maybe you've walked into a room and you've immediately sensed that something is off before you could even point to a reason why. So that's the neuroception. That's your body already having a sense of something happening in your environment before your conscious mind has processed it. So you don't choose neuroception, but you can influence it. So when we orient to a space of safety, so even now, if we just take a look around the room, if we orient to our environment around us, which we're going to practice together in more detail, when we orient to a place of safety, we're giving our nervous system a new sensory evidence to scan, to let it know that it's safe, that danger is not here. So this is also what's happening underneath co-regulation. So it runs on what they read in you. That's your tone, your pace, your own nervous system state is data that their neuroception is also scanning for too. So this is what we're speaking when we speak of co-regulation, the regulation between the two, the responder state and the survivor state. So your nervous system is the first intervention. Nervous systems entrain to each other. So entrainment, it means it's similar to synchronization. So one system's rhythm pulling another towards it. So the way that a slower heartbeat in a room can measurably slow someone else's. So maybe you've had that experience of being next to someone who you've had an experience of feeling maybe calmer with, or maybe you felt your heartbeat quicken in that moment. So it happens beneath conscious control, and it's on both sides of the interaction. So the two are influencing each other. So your state is responding to their state, and their state is also responding to yours. So there's a co-regulation. So this is why a dysregulated response, maybe someone reciting a perfectly calm sounding script, can still transmit the activation underneath it. So our regulation is part of the intervention itself. The cost of carrying it. 80% of first responders report experiencing traumatic events on the job. PTSD prevalence runs around 15% among emergency personnel, against a general population baseline, usually cited around 4 to 6%. In one 2023 study, 41% of EMS professionals met criteria for vicarious trauma. 24% had considered suicide. So childhood adversity and prior exposure to violence independently predicted who developed vicarious trauma in that sample. So that's to share the importance of your own self-care, and that your own history also shapes the regulation equation too. It's not just theirs, you're responding to each other. And just a note here that sadly, advocate and hotline specific data was a lot sparser. So let's start here. Let's just take a moment maybe before we now go into the kind of second part of the presentation. Let's just notice what is alive for us in this moment, how we are feeling. So Peter Levine and Deb Dana, they all start regulation work here. So we name a resource. So a resource is anything that brings you even a little more ease. We have examples of internal resources that might be in your breath, your heartbeat. You might begin to feel your feet on the ground. Maybe you feel your back in the chair. It might be a personal strength or a memory that feels good to recall. An external resource. This could be another person. That could be the chair. It could be a blanket. It might be your pet. It might be gazing outside of the window and seeing a tree. It might mean holding a cup of tea, maybe feeling the warmth. So I'm going to invite you now just to spend a moment feeling into your body. Can you find one place maybe that feels neutral, or maybe it feels good? So for me right now, that is, I have one foot on the floor and I'm feeling my back being supported by the chair. So let's just take a breath together. Let's just notice if we need to make any movement, what our body might be asking for in this moment. So here we get practical. So SCOPE is a 5-step field protocol developed by Somatic Experiencing International. It's used with frontline and disaster responders worldwide. So this will be our anchor sequence for today. It's designed to help the nervous system discover that it has more options. So what I'll walk you through is just one way that I might approach it. It's not the only way. Every person and every situation is so different. So let's begin with the S, slow down. So hypervigilance speeds up our sense of time and it pulls us outside of the body. So moving slower than feels natural interrupts that urgency loop. And for someone that's in hypoarousal, it might gently begin to reactivate their system. So this might look like saying, there's no rush. We've got time. Let's take this one step at a time. So your own pace in that moment, that becomes the permission. So you can try this exercise now, or you can save it for later. You can stand if you can, or you might just shift your weight if you're seated. You might take a step much slower than feels natural. With each step, you might notice the sensation, maybe on the bottom of your foot, maybe heel to toe. So really seeing if you can begin to slow that movement down. And then we have C, connecting to the body. And it's important to say here that we are always asking for permission. So we might invite someone into, for example, we might cross the arms and ankles. We might tuck the hands under the armpits. So you might follow me with this practice now. So taking either hand, placing that under the armpit. So this can give the body that same physiological signal as being held. It's proprioceptive. It says that we can stay contained and safe without needing another person present. So this might look like saying, before anything else, would it feel okay to cross your arms? Maybe just notice that for a moment. So it's important to note here that self-touch isn't always soothing for everyone. This might also look like working with a textured object that can work as a substitute. So I might also offer them maybe a warm drink and ask if they can feel the warmth in their hands. And if you want to try this practice, you might tuck your hands under your armpit, maybe lower your head slightly. Maybe just take a few slower breaths. Or you might, if you have an object available, you might just take that object into your hands. Notice the texture, noticing the temperature. And orienting. So orienting reflex draws attention to safe, non-threatening stimuli. So it doesn't require that the prefrontal cortex to be fully online. So you might say, before we do anything else, would it be okay if we just looked around the room together for a moment? You might suggest that they look left, slowly to the right. Or you might identify colored objects in the room. So you might say, would it be okay if we scan the room? Maybe we can find something blue. Would it be okay if we let our eyes settle on that object? Maybe we can take in the color, the shape of that object. Then we might move to finding something green. But again, we're always asking permission. And then pendulate. So Levine describes this as the body's natural rhythm of contraction and expansion. So naturally we contract, we expand. So this isn't asking someone to leave their activation behind. It's repeatedly touching something that feels okay. Maybe we return to that resource that we identified at the beginning. And then returning maybe to that place of activation. Then again, returning to that resource. Maybe it's their feet on the floor. Maybe it's a blanket. So this is what teaches the nervous system that it can move through intensity and have time to come back. So healing rarely happens through overwhelming exposure. So if we think when we were thinking of with the window of tolerance, we don't increase the window of tolerance by pushing ourselves beyond it. We gently grow our capacity. We realize our edges, and we come back in. We touch something that feels okay, feels neutral. And maybe we come back to that place of activation. So it happens in manageable doses, and this is what's called titration. So pendulation is how that dosing actually gets delivered. So how that might look, you might say, as you notice that, whatever that place of activation is, can you also notice the chair supporting you right now? Maybe you can work with them to find that resource, coming back through that activation, moving back into that resource. So we can try it together now. If we notice one place in the body that's maybe holding some tension, let's not push ourselves out of that window of tolerance. Maybe it's just a place of tightness, of tension, somewhere that we recognize we're holding. And if we find our resource, so we come back to that resource that we identified earlier. That might be in a place, a memory, the tree outside of the window. Maybe it's something internal. And then can we let our attention move slowly between the two? So a gentle, a back and forth. So that contraction and the expansion. And if at any point it just feels better to stay with that resource, we stay there. And engage. So trauma often pulls us towards isolation. So right at the moment when connection is most regulating. So this step deliberately reverses that pull. Social engagement is part of that ventral vagal, that social, safe social state that we discussed earlier. So it's the completion of the sequence. So you might ask, is there someone who knows you're carrying this today? If another person doesn't feel safe, it could be a pet, it could be nature, or staying connected to yourself also counts. So we have scope all together. So that's slow down. That might look like taking 10 slow steps, feeling the feet, connecting to the body. An example was crossing your arms and ankles, taking a breath, orienting, letting the gaze rest on something pleasant. Pendulate, shifting attention between activation and a resource. Engage. So reach towards someone who might be able to support you. So we're just going to walk through what an example of this might look like in practice. So we'll take an example, first of all, of someone in hyper arousal, so someone in an activated state. So let's imagine that someone comes in, you recognize that they're breathing quickly, they're looking around the room constantly, they're talking very fast, perhaps they're crying, perhaps they're saying something on repeat. So maybe step one might be to regulate myself first. So the first thing I'm noticing is myself. Am I speaking quickly? Am I holding my breath? Am I rushing because I'm anxious? So I might begin to use that first step for myself. Can I slow myself? I might feel my own feet on the floor. Take one slower breath. I might relax my shoulders because my nervous system is also going to become part of this interaction. So step two might be creating safety. So I might say something like, firstly, I'm really glad you're here. You're not alone. You're safe here. We don't have to rush. We'll take this one step at a time. So I haven't asked for the story yet. I'm helping their nervous system hear the emergency that isn't happening in this room. Step three, I might orient. And I'd always be asking permission. So always asking permission. Would it feel okay if before we talk, we just take a moment to look around the room together? If they say yes, I might say, can you notice something blue? Can you allow your eyes to settle on that object? Can you notice the color, the shape, the texture? Maybe then pausing, moving to something green. So we're helping the nervous system gather new information. Step four might be connection. So I might gently invite awareness back into the body. So we're not rushing this step at either. This can kind of push someone also outside of that window of intolerance, but it's always an invitation. Would it feel okay to just maybe feel into your feet, to notice your feet? Can you feel the floor underneath them? Perhaps we begin to gently pedal the feet, maybe toe to heel, heel to toe. Maybe we begin to gently roll the wrists. So then we might resource. So is there anything that helps you feel even a little bit more grounded in this moment? Is there anywhere in your body or externally that feels okay or feels neutral? And it's okay if they can't recall anything in that moment. We might come then to the breath. I might gently take attention to the breath. Would it help if we just took one slow breath together? So this is part of that co-regulation. And then once I've moved through this, I notice they're engaged. Perhaps they're making a little bit more eye contact. I might say, whenever you're ready, would you like to tell me what brought you in today? So making sure that choice is part of that. So choice is always part of that regulation. We can also give the example of someone in hypoarousal. So the practices might look very similar, but if you imagine in hyperarousal, we're gently bringing someone's nervous system down. In hypoarousal, we're gently beginning to introduce movement. We're increasing their activity. So the person walks through the door, maybe they're barely speaking, maybe they're staring at the floor. Perhaps every answer is, I don't know, or maybe it's just a shrug, or maybe it's nothing. It's someone that just looks startled. So this is another amazing survival response. The nervous system has decided that stillness feels safer than action. So I might begin that same way. I'm really glad you're here. We don't need to rush. We might orient to the space. Would it feel okay to just have a look around the room with me? Maybe they don't respond verbally. That's okay. But are their eyes moving? Are they noticing anything in the room? Can they notice color? So I'm always asking what channel is available. And we're going to look in this in the next slide. Then I might invite very small movement. Would it feel okay to gently roll your wrists? Can you gently press your feet into the ground? And something that's important to note here is that when people move out of that freeze response, they might move first through activation. So they might start crying, their breath might speed up, they might become frightened. So that's the nervous system beginning to move again. And you would just walk them through those same steps. So here, which channel is still open? This is a practical diagnostic tool by Bodella's contact channels for assessing someone who's dysregulated. So we've just walked through those two examples, someone that is in hyperarousal and someone that is in hypoarousal. So the interventions look slightly different, but my thinking might have been the same. I'm thinking, what is this nervous system able to do right now? Which channels are open? So, for example, can they track movement? Can they hold eye contact? Are they looking where you point with the voice? Can they hear you? Can they respond verbally? Maybe can they follow a simple instruction with their hands? Can they hold an object? Can they mirror a gesture with their feet? Can they feel the ground? Can they shift their weight? Can they take a step? So we always start with what is online. So we're asking, where can I meet them in this moment? So that's the collaborative nature. And practically, it stops us asking people to do things that their nervous system isn't ready to do in that moment. So if movement isn't available, perhaps we begin with vision. If vision isn't available, maybe we begin with sound. So we're following their nervous system. They are always taking the lead. So here I'll share a few tools that Carrie-Anne can deepen with you in future practices so that you have a small toolkit. So these are 4 that I find myself returning to. And just before we look at those, just remembering state before story and small choices. So agency being the medicine. So a small choice like, would you rather sit here or stand? These can be profoundly regulating for a nervous system that has experienced powerlessness. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So here, if you are on a crisis hotline, you can't hand someone a blanket. You can't sit beside them, but you might be able to say, can I try something with you? There's no pressure if it doesn't feel right. But can you just tell me 5 things that you can see where you are? Can you tell me 3 things that you can hear? So if someone is very overwhelmed, I won't insist on all 5 stages. Sometimes I'll simply ask for 3 things that they can see. That might be enough. So we're trying to reduce the cognitive load, not overwhelm it. So you might do this practice now. So instead of moving through all 5, you might just pick one. So maybe for a moment, just listening to what are 3 things that you can hear right now in your environment. What are 3 things that you can hear right now in your environment? And then just notice if anything has shifted just after that simple practice. So havening, or more simply, it's just gentle self-contact. So this idea that gentle, repetitive touch can sometimes help the nervous system to feel safe, but also remembering that touch is not always regulating. So if we wanted to try this together, it might mean, would it feel okay to gently bring your hands to to your arms. Maybe we slowly and downward sweeping movements. Or maybe you would rather just keep your hands resting where they are. So you might stay with this for a few moments. You might then bring your hands to your face with slow sweeping movements. And then just taking a moment, noticing how that makes you feel. The body scan. So the body scan I find very useful, but I would never use it in a moment of intense activation. So this is really when someone maybe has already left that moment of activation. It could even be a practice that you give them, maybe to help them sleep that night. So it's rather than asking simply, how do you feel? It's asking, what do you notice? Maybe there's warmth, maybe there's tightness. So what do you notice? That asks for an observation. So that tiny change can make the body aware of what's more accessible in that moment. The breath. So think of the breathing again. This is always an invitation. I might slow my own breathing first and then gently ask, would it help if we did one slow breath together? You might imagine that you are blowing out a candle with your exhale. So you're elongating the exhale. And maybe you would do the practice together. So then this room ranked avoiding burnout as its number 2 priority. So let's talk about sustaining this work. So starting with the thing that matters most and the thing that I feel so strongly about. So burnout isn't simply an individual problem. It's very often a systems problem. You'll sometimes hear you need better self-care. And of course, rest matters, movement matters, connection matters. But no amount of self-care can fully compensate for the workloads, trauma exposure, or working without adequate supervision. So the research supports this directly. In one study, 48% of officers that had used peer support, most said it improved their duty performance and their home life. 60% of first responders reported needing care, but fewer than half of those who needed it actually sought it, largely because of stigma. And then a case discussion and social support independently predicted lower secondary traumatization. So discussing what is coming up with a peer or with a supervisor, or having a social support system. So this might be something that you then now take directly to your workplace. What is supervision? What is peer support, structured debriefing, workload protection? Someone that you can turn to in a moment of crisis for yourself is so important for this work. And then, of course, when support isn't there. So until those systems improve, there are a few kind of bridge measures. So talking to someone, even if informally, it doesn't need to be a formal debrief. Sometimes simply saying, that was a really hard call today. That allows your system to stop carrying it alone. Protecting your recovery windows. Where you have any time, you avoid stacking back-to-back high-intensity contacts without time to breathe or to orient. You might build a closing ritual at the end of your shift. Maybe it's one written line, a few quiet minutes. You might just wash your hands before you leave. So small rituals can help your nervous system recognize that work has actually finished. And then watching for signs that you're carrying too much. So noticing what that means for you. That might look like irritability, it might look like numbness, cynicism, rushing, poor sleep, difficulty switching off. So they're often the earliest signs that your nervous system is needing support. And then can you name the barrier out loud? If stigma is what is stopping you from receiving support, maybe you can say so to a friend. That itself can be the first step. So leaving you with these 5 things. So regulate yourself first. State before story. Before we ask somebody what happened, we ask what state their nervous system is in. Small choices restore agency. Would you like some water? Would you prefer the door open or the door closed? Would you like to stand or sit? So trauma so often takes choice away. These questions can be really regulating in themselves. Remembering that slow is fast. And connection changes our physiology. So every experience of safety, every moment of genuine connection, every opportunity to make a choice is new information for the nervous system. And then just before we open up for questions, I'd love for us to just experience one practice together. And this is completely optional as always. So let's begin by noticing your feet. No need to change anything, just noticing. Now, perhaps allow your eyes to gently look around wherever you are, just noticing what is around you in this moment. If it feels comfortable, let one exhale become just a little longer than the inhale. You might use that practice of just imagining that you are blowing out a candle. You might see if your eyes naturally land on something pleasant or neutral. Noticing where you're holding any tension. For example, the jaw or the hips is often, or the shoulders is often where we carry a lot of tension. Can we allow it to soften? And before you move back into the rest of your day, think of one person you'll connect with after today. Is there someone that you can text, or someone you're just simply grateful that they exist? And then maybe in this moment, we can just begin to ask ourselves, what is one thing that your nervous system might need from you today? Maybe it's rest, maybe it's movement, maybe connection, maybe it's food. One small act of care. And then gently bringing your attention back into this room. And I know we're coming to time, so I'm just going to leave you with these 3 resources. So there's practices if you want to deepen into some of this training, if you would like to seek a practitioner, or if you need support. And thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thank you for the work that you do. And I think we have enough time maybe to just get into a few questions.
Wonderful, Iona. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you showing up for us and just helping bring this really different perspective to healing, because we're often so good at providing safety resources for housing or mental health therapy in the form of talk therapy. And so this body-based practice I know is going to really impact so many people. We've got several questions. I know we only have a couple minutes, so we'll see what we can get through. How long after abuse can trauma impact the body, memory, and nervous system?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. I don't have there's not a figure, and every body is so different. So remembering the uniqueness of each nervous system, there are so many factors that can influence that. So we discussed very briefly, what was that person already carrying before that trauma that they came in with? So someone that maybe had a lot of childhood trauma, that might look like complex PTSD, CPTSD, that development can look slightly different, because that trauma can also work on the level of identity. So, how they're perceiving the world around them, rather than someone who's experiencing a shock trauma and it's happened on a nervous system that needs time to respond, but they can come back because they know what safety looks like. So, they have an identity that they can return to, as opposed to someone that's kind of experienced CPTSD when the identity itself might be fused with the trauma.
Yeah.
So it is a really complicated question, and it very much depends on the person in front of you in that moment.
Yeah. And also the intervention,
Yeah.
right? I mean, time does not heal all wounds, even though we think, we were taught that it does. What we do with that time is what matters. So I want people to hear that too, is that trauma is going to live in the body if we're
Mm.
just like, when is this going to go away, without helping rewire the nervous system for safety and increasing window of tolerance and all of that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
okay.
absolutely. And then moving through those steps can then help kind of bring the body back online. And also, just
Mhm.
as like a bit of positivity, is that you still have people who are 98. There was one amazing study recently, and just showing that you can kind of rewire your brain at any moment. So something that you've experienced and it's been so held in the body, you can still have different perspective, different life views, well into your 90s.
I
So
love
there
that.
is
So
always
you
possibility of change.
Yes, you can teach an old dog new tricks. I love that. That's so good. Can you briefly explain again what hypoarousal looks like? I know we only have 1 minute, so this will be your elevator pitch for hypoarousal.
Yeah, so hypoarousal is that dorsal ventral vagal. So the coming into when your body is in shutdown, it's in freeze response. So quite often, let's say that we move through those three gears, we have that mobilize, our social, then we have our mobilize, the hyperarousal. And
Mhm.
then when nothing can be enacted, so we have all of that energy in our body and it's not able to go anywhere. Often what happens is that our body depresses it, it suppresses it, and then we move into that hypoarousal state. So that looks like numbness, freeze, dissociation, shutdown.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Well, we weren't able to get to all the questions, but I will email them to you so
Yeah.
that we can get just a little kind of Q&A page. But I want to say thank you so much, Iona, for coming and sharing all of this with us. I know for a lot of our folks, this might be the first experience of somatics, and you gave us
Mm.
some really helpful frameworks. The SCOPE acronym, I'm absolutely going to adopt that into my own practice. So thank you for being with us. And to all of you that are attending, thank you for being here. The fact that you have showed up for this call means that you are continuing to look for ways to support the survivors that you are serving. And that just speaks volumes about you. So we appreciate you. Also, we are bringing back cultivating calm. So Iona talked about a lot of different practices. If you want a space to actually do these techniques and feel what they feel like in your body, every Thursday in August, I'm a psychosomatic practitioner and I actually trained with Iona. I will be guiding you through Cultivating Calm, where we'll do these practices and really explore them so you have even more of a felt sense of what they are like. The registration link should be in the chat, but we will also send an email out. And again, in 1 week, we'll send you a recording, transcript, certificate of attendance, all of that. So thank you for being here. And Iona, thank you so much. All right.
Thank you so much.
Be well, all. Bye.